All right. Good morning. You're welcome to another edition of Import Export Platform Facebook Live from 3 Best Trade Academy. My name is Dele Ayemibo. Remember, we are discussing starting and managing export business. And today we are looking at part 32. We've been on this for a while now. Like I said, I don't know when it will end before we move on to other important things. But what I'm very sure of is we will continue until we get to the very end. And our objective basically is to basically educate, just as our name is, first is education, trade enhancement, and trade execution. By trade enhancement, we basically mean trade support services. Trade support services. And that's what trade enhancement is all about, trade support services and trade execution. So, and that's very important for us as a business in the sense that we have given ourselves the mandate to propagate, like someone called it yesterday during the session, the gospel of export. But it's actually the gospel of trade. It's actually the gospel of trade, not necessarily export. It might appear we are doing more of export because Nigeria, as of today, is doing a lot of import, which is good, but not adding as much value to our economy as much as export will have done. So that's why we are spending more time discussing export. Why? Because export, we believe strongly, we add more value to this economy than import. But not to discount the value of import in its entirety. No, not to discount that in its entirety. But to talk about the fact that export is something we must consider, export is something we must do, export is something we must give all the attention it deserves because of the value that export gives to any economy in the world. Like I often say in every event I find myself, that go and check up any country you can say is developed, any country you can say this is a developed country, and this country is doing so thing. You know what? That country is that country will be a major exporter in Nigeria. Sorry, major exporter in the world, rather, if they are called developed. If they are called developed, they might be exporting services, not necessarily goods. But if they are called developed, I can assure you, without any shadow of doubt, that such a country, will definitely be a major exporter in the world. Just go and check the top economy in the world. Then you agree with me what I'm talking about. So we'll move on to what we plan to do today, which is open account. Remember, open account is a payment method in international trade. It's a payment method in international trade, and a lot of people tend to shy away from it, mainly because of the risk that open account poses to every trade transaction. Under open account, for example, under this method, exporters send invoice and document relating to transfer of title and possession of the goods direct to the buyer, which is the importer. On receipt of such document, the importer remits the amount involved immediately or at a later date. In case a credit period is allowed, the importer will make the payment at an expiry period in future. This method is very simple and avoid any complication and additional charges. The entire risk in this case is on the exporter. The entire risk in this case is on the exporter. The entire risk in this case is on the exporter. This is probably the least secure payment method for you as an exporter. Your buyer received goods and then paid for them, usually with a credit period. This payment method extends the period before which your business receives cash, and your working capital position is impacted because you get paid at a later date, you get paid in the future. Because you get paid at a later date and you get paid in future, your working capital is impacted. As risky as you might think this payment method is, I dare say that this is one of the most utilized, engaged payment method in the world. This is one of the most utilized, engaged form of payment method in the world. Why? Because this payment method make life easy for the exporter, even though it put the importer at risk. And you should understand that largely export, the business of export is largely the buyer's market. The business of export is largely the buyer's market. Everybody is producing in the world. Everybody is looking for everybody to buy their product, and that poses a challenge. And the challenge it poses is the fact that if you don't get a buyer, it's like you are going to be losing. So many buyers are willing, sellers are willing to give the goods and wait for payment to come. After all, they produce the goods. If you don't get a buyer for the goods, what happens afterwards? There are very few producers in the world that have less competition, such that you can say, look, if you don't pay me in advance, I won't deal. Unless the buyers are afraid of not getting paid an open account. But for Europeans, and probably a lot of Asians and Americans, open account is the in thing. The world is doing about $20 trillion in trade, averagely, between 80 and 20. 80% of that, which amounts to about $16 trillion, are done on open account. 80% of that, which amounts to about $16 trillion, are done on open account. And that is very instructive. That's very instructive. That's to tell you that if you are going to trade in international trade, you must learn to trade on open account. Of course, I'll be telling you about the risk because it has its own risk. But the fact still remains that this payment method can be secured. And many people around the world have been able to find a way to secure this. So what you should do as a trader is, what do I need to do to secure myself? For a number of buyers, open account does not look like what they want to do. Sellers. But for a number of buyers, open account look like what they want to do. There is a growth in the utilization of open account around the world. Trade finance has never stood still, but in the last decade, its most fundamental rule has changed. Cultural, geographic, and communication barriers are dissolving, facilitating a significant increase in international trade. In this hyper-connected world, even the smallest company can use technology to sell their product overseas. And shipment that once took weeks or months now happen in matter of days. Those changes in our world are so important and so critical, and you must factor them in as you do your trade transaction. It is not only the pace of physical movement which is changing. There has also been a huge increase in the volume of trade. We are also seeing new types of products, intangible goods like software, being sold internationally. With globalization increasing trade volumes, bringing new players to the market and intensifying competition, there is increasing pressure on sellers to meet buyers' demands. This often happens in form of flexible payment terms. This often happens in form of flexible payment terms. You know, this is very, very important. Very, very important. Sorry, I'm trying to. This is so important, extremely important, much more than we can imagine. And this change in our world must be. This in our world, you must align with that change. If you do not align with the change, you know what will happen? You'll be left behind. You'll be left behind. You'll be left behind. You'll be left behind. With globalization increasing trade volume, there is a need for you to become more flexible. And buyers are beginning to demand. Everybody wants to sell. Everybody wants to sell. New players are coming to the market. The need for flexible terms becomes necessary. So there has been serious shift towards open account trading, where goods are delivered sometimes weeks, months ahead of when payment is due. Open account trading can benefit growing companies and SMEs, making them more attractive to buyers, helping them get a competitive edge. It also speeds up the transaction cycle and frees businesses from reliance on traditional finance instruments like letter of credit. But it's far from a perfect solution. It is far from a perfect solution. So everybody, one way or the other, is being forced to consider open account. Everybody, one way or the other, is being forced to give open account a chance. And if you choose not to give open account a chance, you can likewise kiss bye-bye to trade transaction. You can likewise kiss bye-bye to trade transaction. It's extremely, extremely important for us to begin to see and understand and appreciate the changes and dynamics of international trade that we must begin to respect and work with. The dynamics of international trade become extremely, extremely important for us to align ourselves with it. If you do not align yourself with it, like I said, you can likewise kiss bye-bye to international trade. We must align ourselves with it. Why? Because that's the only way we will be able to enjoy the benefit that the modern trend in globalization is giving to every one of us. And I tell you, what is happening in the world in terms of globalization is a big opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to explore. It's something everybody must key into. You know, it's like a force. It's like a flood coming. You have a choice. Run away from the road and not be part of it, or enjoy the flow and flow with the wind. But if you want to move against it, the flow will carry you away out of the way. And even big companies are beginning to align. All of them are aligning. Why are they doing that? They are doing that because it's becoming extremely necessary for them to do. Why is it necessary for them to do? Because if they don't do it, they won't be able to make the desired progress. So you can't really stand by the side. You have to be part of the movement. Being part of the movement is extremely important. Being part of the movement is extremely important. Being part of the movement is extremely, extremely important. Else, you will become irrelevant. Else, you will become irrelevant. Why open account trading has benefit buyers? it substantially increases the risk of sellers not being paid. In the current world of B2B trade, there is a high risk of customers becoming insolvent and not paying their invoices or failing to pay within the agreed terms. So there is a need for you to begin to find a way to ensure your payment if you must trade on open account terms. But it's been reported that only about 5% of B2B trading in the world are insured, meaning 95% are left exposed, especially when there is no payment risk to mitigate that risk. Notoriously difficult to predict which transaction will go wrong. On average, 40% of companies' assets are in form of trade debt, and sometimes this figure can be much higher. So it's very hard for most business to predict who will default on payment. Almost 50% of payment default come from vendors with whom a stable and long-term relationship has been established. Almost 50% of payment default occur from a vendor that have been very much stable, and even you have established a long-term relationship. You know what I is telling you? The fact that we have a long-term relationship, the fact that we have traded together correctly, the fact that is a genuine business person, the fact that he has done well in the past does not mean you must leave yourself unduly exposed. Does not mean you must leave yourself unduly exposed. 50% of people defaulting, 50% of people defaulting did not default yesterday. They started defaulting today. They started defaulting today. Not because they really wanted to default, by the way, but they find themselves in a situation that they can't help. They defaulted anyway. Now, because of that chance of default, because of that risk of default, you need to find a way to protect yourself. Because of that chance of default, because of that risk of default, you need to find a way to protect yourself. And this is so important. The fact that there's a chance of default is to make you to begin to look at, how do I protect myself so that if this very lovely, interesting buyer of my default, it doesn't affect my business. Remember, 50% of customer defaulting are being in a long-term relationship. 50% of customers that fail to pay on what they purchase are in a long-term business relationship, meaning they are not really a regular debtor, only that this just happened. Not that they are used to regularly defaulting, no. But for this transaction, it happened. Now, because of the fact that it often happens, meaning you as an individual must find a way to protect yourself. So one of the things I will be talking about in the course of this conversation is, how then do we mitigate this risk? Protect ourselves against the risk of not getting paid because of the fact that we have a buyer that began to default, not because he wanted to default, maybe economic crisis, challenge in the economy contribute to them becoming a default player. I'm basically saying that you must find a way to protect yourself. Today, corporate business operate in a high risk and trade intensive environment built up of relatively small transactions, creating greater demand for trade insurance, and a lot of these transactions are one-off deals instead of repeated ongoing purchases. As this trade intensity increases, so does the importance of cost efficiency in risk mitigation. Every extra hour spent on administration is amplified when you are dealing with thousands of small transactions. This means cost and admin efficiency is key for corporates when they seek out trade solutions. But many banks are struggling to give their customers the efficiency and protection they need. Banks can struggle with changing mindset, legacy infrastructure, and lack of knowledge. In fact, it's been said some are lacking knowledge about new financing options, while others lack traditional skill. We are in the middle of a generational shift. We need to adapt to the new world order. We need to adapt to the new world order. So you must find a way to protect yourself in the midst of the current drift and the move towards open account trading, which of course does not protect you. Open account trading occurs when a seller ships goods and all the necessary shipping documents are sent directly to the buyer, who agree to pay for the invoice at a future date. Open account is typically used between trusted traders. The time of payment usually can be 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days after the date of invoice or the date of bill of lading. That means payment comes days after shipment, months after shipment. Before payment is made, most of the time, goods are already in the custody of the buyer. So there is a risk of buyer defaulting on payment obligation. There is a risk in delays in availability of foreign exchange and transferring funds from the buyer's country to the seller's country. Payment can be blocked due to political events, economic issue in that country. Risk to the buyer. Seller does not ship as per order. Seller does not ship when requested. However, the buyer is protected in the sense that the buyer can then put in place a measure to mitigate this risk. Seller has absolute trust that buyer will accept shipment and pay as agreed term. Seller is confident that importing country will not impose regulation deferring or blocking transfer of payment. Seller has sufficient liquidity. Now, this is when to use open account. Exporter has trust, absolute trust in the buyer that will pay at the agreed time. If you want to give an open account terms as a seller, you must have confidence in the importing country that there's no regulation that will affect your payment. If you want to trade an open account as a seller, you must have sufficient liquidity and access outside financing to be able to remain in business while your fund is outside. You must have enough fund that will keep you to remain in business when your fund is outside. Seller finances buyer through deferring payment terms. In open account trading, seller may be able to obtain bank financing through pledge of receivables, but the financier will be sure that that buyer have what it takes to pay. Is a rated company and integrity to pay is there. Selling receivables on a non-recourse basis to the buyer is possible, especially in clients that credit rating is given the utmost attention and importance that it deserves. Utmost attention and importance that it deserves. As global trade continues to recover, Banks are playing an important role in financing. They are providing a range of traditional instruments such as letter of credit, as well as a variety of other instruments, other offerings. During the recession, many people that traded and open account lost money. And since after the recession, what has been happening is them now protecting themselves using other finance instruments. Exporting an open account involves bank, of course, even if only to carry out a straightforward electronic transfer. Bank is involved indirectly. Banking services for firm trading and open account go far beyond payment and increasingly move into the realm of finance and risk mitigation. A short-term loan is an obvious way for a supplier to bridge that gap, but that loan will only be given when the bank giving that loan is assured of the receipt of the account receivable. And like I said, this will often happen in an environment where they have been able to assess the people and they are sure significantly that they will mitigate that risk. One of the things we must learn and know to do is mitigating that risk. The risk of open account trading. The risk of open account trading. The risk of open account trading. I'll be rounding off now. When I come back in the evening, we are going to be discussing extensively how to mitigate the risk of open account transaction. We'll be discussing extensively, still talking about open account, but I will now be focusing on how to mitigate the risk that every individual face when they do open account trading. Thank you very much for listening to me again this morning. My name is Dele Ayimibo, and this is Import Export Platform Facebook Live from 3T Import Trade Academy. Remember, we'll come up every day by 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays, discussing international trade issues. We have been going through starting and managing export business for a while now. We are currently on part 32, and we are discussing issues around payment in international trade. These videos are always on Facebook. If you want to see the previous edition of this transaction, go right there on Facebook. Go to 3T Import TV on Facebook. Right there, you will see previous videos, edition of these videos on 3T Import TV. Share the video, like the video, drop your comment, and click on the bell. Click on the bell so you can get the notification. Thank you very much for listening. See you in the evening, and bye for now.